I've got a feeling that you're a man who wants to work with everybody. I've appreciated in one of your books that you said that even your enemies you learn to like again and live with them, and that's very important, isn't it?
Well, it is. I mean, I have a philosophy on life. It's sort of, remember the old Beatles song called Let It Be? I mean, you're too young, but I would remember this.
Oh, no. Thank you for the compliment.
The Beatles wrote a song called Let It Be in the late 60s. And the good thing about that is, and that's very much my attitude to life, you've got to let it be in the sense that you get there, you try and make a difference, which is what I try and do in government. That's why I'm there. But if things don't go the way you want, you can't carry a grudge. I've seen good people in my life destroy themselves, eaten away from inside because of anger or jealousy or disappointment, and they haven't been able to cope with it. I mean, I think the secret of life is doing things that you enjoy in terms of a job, but if life disappoints you, and it does, happens to all of us, you've got to let it be, you've got to get over it, you've got to move on with it. And that's why, life's too short to be bitter and to try and get revenge and all those sort of things. You've got to be positive. If you have a positive attitude, I think you live longer.
Well, that was a question I was going to ask you later, but I will now. That's one thing. I read Arena, and the thing that came across to me there is that you do get on with life and you accept that you've done the wrong thing sometimes. That takes a big man to do that, doesn't it?
Well, we all make mistakes. Yeah. I've made my share of mistakes. And we have to be big enough to say, look, gee, I got it wrong, and this happens, gee, I wish I'd done that differently. If only I had thought that through. Look, we all make mistakes. It's a human quality. I reckon if I could get 65 or 70% of all the decisions I made, if they were right in retrospect, which is how they get judged, I'd be delighted. And that's why, in terms of government, we try and involve people, be inclusive. Because two heads are better than one, as the old saying goes. You can get a different perspective, and then you can lift those odds of the decisions about getting things right. There will always be arguable about what's right, but clearly, while that's arguable, everyone knows what's wrong.
Well, I'm looking forward to your administration. When you first became Premier and you had a press conference, you spoke about being born with a plastic spoon in your mouth. And you spoke about your childhood, and you were the youngest of 7 children, and you came from a very working class, poverty-stricken family, really. Has that had a great meaning in your life? Has that altered your thinking?
Well, it has, because it gives you a drive to advance yourself. I'm the only one in my family who went to university. I got there courtesy of the old Commonwealth Scholarship that John Gorton had, which you had to win in those days. And while I was at university, Gough Whitlam came along and abolished university fees. So I owe my university education to the Liberals under John Gorton, to the Labor Party under Gough Whitlam. So how's that for being bipartisan?
Very good.
But you do get a drive out of that, and you do want to improve yourself. And I'd be dishonest if I didn't say that. Yeah, I'm the 7th. As you can see, they got better as we went on. But you get a drive out of all of that, and I think I do always appreciate people who've been able to build themselves up, and that's why education is so important to me. Education means, in our system, that you can be whatever you want to be, regardless of where you come from. If you use your brains, you study, and you make it. Now, education was the leveller, and is the leveller for me. That's one of the things that makes this great country of ours great. That is, you can be whatever you want to be. It doesn't matter where you come from, and education's the key.
Yes, well, for a poor boy, you were very good at school, weren't you?
Well, I was, but which just goes to show that brains has got nothing to do with wealth.
Yes.
I mean, brains can make wealth, but you are born with a certain amount of ability, and I'm not trying to say I'm clever, but it means that if we're going to be a clever society, which is what we should, we've got to have an education system maintain the education system where everyone has an equal opportunity to progress and to be successful. And out of that, we'll get our best brains to do what has to be done.
Sounds pretty good to me. When you were 5 years of age, your mother passed away. That must have been very traumatic for a young child.
Well, it was. I was, in fact, she died in October and I was 5 in November. I wasn't quite 5. And yes, it was traumatic. I mean, I know these days about equality and all the rest of it, but no one will ever convince me that mothers aren't more important, particularly for young children. They are.
Yes.
They have a special relationship, mothers, with their children. And yes, it was a traumatic experience. Being the youngest, and there were 7 in the family, we weren't very well off, as you know, and the family got broken up. We went all over Australia, and I went to live with my mother's mother in Atherton in North Queensland.
That's right.
And from there, I had the opportunities that perhaps I wouldn't have had I, stayed in country New South Wales, which is where we live. But,
do you feel bitter that the family was broken up?
well, not really. I mean, I'm disappointed. I mean, I never really grew up with my father, and he died in the late 70s. I never really got to know him because I was young and I was sent 1,000 miles away to live with my mother's mother, my grandmother. I mean, there were times when I've missed that. We have a family tradition. We get together, the 7 of us, well, there's 6, one of my brothers died, but we get together every 4 years. I have a sister that lives in French Polynesia, another one who lives in Sydney, one lives in Condobolin in Western New South Wales. I have a brother who's now just moved to Brisbane the last couple of years, another one who lives at the entrance in New South Wales. So we all get together once every 4 years to talk about this, but we never really grew up together. So that's something that we try and recapture.
So the love has grown now then, being together.
It's a strange thing where there is a bond between all of us as a result of it. We've all gone our different ways and we are different people, but nevertheless the experience has still maintained us, and there's a sense of, while we lost our mother, and I was the youngest, but we lost our mother when we were all children because we weren't all that far apart, 7 of us. Nevertheless, there is still that bond that has remained. And out of that, I mean, I was very lucky. My grandmother, who was old school and is about as tough as you get, she really played the role that was very much the case then. The extended family was a norm then. People did it. I mean, the extended family these days is the exception rather than the rule. Then it was the way it was done. You always looked after your nieces or your grandchildren if there was a tragedy. So that's all changed. But look, I got a wealth of experience from my grandmother. She gave me the opportunity and I'll always be grateful for that.
So it wasn't a shock to her when young Peter Beattie turned up on the doorstep?
Well, no, I was very young, but no, it wasn't a shock. She did the right thing. In fact, what happened was my mother was the youngest of her siblings. There were 4 girls and a boy, and the family was broken up. One of my sisters went to one aunt, another sister went to another aunt, and one of my brothers stayed with my father, and so on. We were all split up around Australia. But she took the youngest, and I've always been grateful for that. Having
an older grandparent, was that a strange thing? Did you miss the youth of the parent, or did you have lots of people surrounding that were young?
Well, it's always hard to judge that. I mean, bearing in mind I was quite young, it was really what I got used to, and I didn't know any better or any different. And while she was very tough and disciplinarian in her approach, when I went to school, I loved school, I enjoyed it. I mean, we lived across the road from the primary school, so I was just, I could nick home for lunch or whatever. Look, I loved school, loved mixing with kids, and I had plenty of those opportunities at primary school and high school, so I didn't miss it. I loved sport, athletics, all that sort of thing, so I just threw myself into it, and I really enjoyed it.
Okay. Well, Atherton was a very great mixture of nationalities. Sure. Did that have a great influence on you?
I think it did, in that I grew up in a society that was interesting. There was a significant tolerance to it, while there was some underlying intolerance. It was a strange society. But one of the strengths I got from growing up in Atherton was this, and that is the Australian tolerance that we have. In my school, there were Chinese Australians, and they had descended from the gold rush. My ancestors came out from Scotland in 1896, my grandfather and his father. The Chinese Australians who were in Atherton, there was a Joss House, all that sort of stuff, they'd come out in the 1840s, 1850s for the gold rushes, so they'd been here before my ancestors. And at school, when I talked to them, my Mandarin was as good as their Mandarin.
Really?
In other words, they couldn't talk it at all.
Oh.
And because they were Australians.
Yes.
They looked different, but they couldn't speak Mandarin.
Yes.
And we had a large Italian population, there was Albanians, there was a lot of Eastern Bloc countries from Estonia, Lithuania, there was a whole range of Yugoslavs. I mean, it was a very strong ethnic mix. And out of that came a huge tolerance. I mean, I used to go, when I was a kid, stringing tobacco in the Christmas holidays for 6 or 5 cents a string. Used to get a long string, used to tie the tobacco on it, and then be put in a barn and would dry. Then when I was a bit older, I went to tobacco farming, and I used to stay for 3 or 4 weeks over the Christmas down on the tobacco farm. And that's where I got to enjoy the wonders of Italian food, polenta and things that people don't understand. And out of that you get a tolerance and understanding, and you realise that multiculturalism is a richness. It is a strength. And those who seek to put down multiculturalism or try and attack those who have a different ethnic origin simply do it out of fear, they simply do it as scapegoating, and they miss the positive richness that comes from it. And multiculturalism's the future, that's where the world's going. Those who oppose it are really historic, and history is important, but that's where they will stay.
Yes, well, there's been such wonderful changes to this country because of all the people that have come in.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah, and if we're smart, where we are in the world gives us an opportunity to use our brains to get into the world. I mean, there are only 18 million of us. It's through things like communications, information technology, trade, exports, education, the services, all those future industries as well as current jobs, we can export that. We have to become a nation of exporters, not only to Asia but to the world, because our domestic market's not big enough for us alone to in fact try new products. So it's an exciting place in the world where we are. We're right there at the bottom of the biggest market in the world, Asia. And if we use our brains, the opportunity for expansion and development is just limitless.
Okay, well, we need you